Today, we're diving into a massive question, but we're going to tackle it with a very specific toolkit: pure logic. We're going to explore a set of classic arguments drawn from Shia theological tradition that try to build a case for God's existence using nothing but reason. The whole challenge is to see if a path to the divine can be paved with logic, not just faith. So let's get into it. So this is the big question, right? Can you actually start with simple, observable facts about the world, things we can all agree on, and then, just by taking rational steps, one after the other, arrive at the conclusion that God exists? That's the claim we're going to investigate. You can think of it like we're about to unroll a philosophical blueprint and examine it piece by piece. All right, section 1, reason as a path. Now, before we can build anything, we've got to check our tools. So, what exactly do we mean by reason in this specific framework? Let's define our terms. So the foundational concept here is something called akal, which translates to reason. Now, what's absolutely crucial to understand is that in this tradition, akal isn't seen as the enemy of faith. Not at all. It's considered a God-given ability, a totally valid, and even a necessary path to real knowledge. The core idea is that your own mind, using careful logic, is a legitimate tool for figuring out fundamental truths about reality. Okay, section 2, clues in the cosmos. So with our main tool defined, let's start our investigation by looking outward. This first set of arguments starts with stuff we can observe in the universe all around us, looking for clues that might be hiding in plain sight. This simple analogy really gets to the heart of the first big argument we're going to look at, the argument from design. I mean, think about it. If you walked into a room and saw a copy of a complex novel, you wouldn't think, oh, an ink bottle must have exploded and all the letters just happened to land in the right order. No way. You'd know instinctively that someone wrote it. There was an intelligence behind it. Well, this argument applies that same exact logic to the universe. Okay, so how does this argument actually work? It's pretty straightforward, really, just 3 steps. First is the observation. We look around and see precise order everywhere, right? From the laws of physics that govern galaxies down to the intricate biology of a single cell. Second, the inference. This incredible level of complexity doesn't look like a random accident. It feels like it has knowledge and planning behind it. And that leads directly to the conclusion. This order must point to an intelligent source, a planner. And here it is, laid out in its more formal logical structure. So a premise is just a statement that you put forward as true to build your case on. Premise 1. Complex, purposeful order is better explained by a designer than by random chance. Premise 2. The universe is just full of that kind of complex, purposeful order. So if you accept both of those premises, the argument says, then the conclusion logically follows. The universe is best explained by an intelligent designer. Now, let's shift our focus a little bit. We've talked about the structure of the universe. Now let's think about its behavior. I mean, just think about it for a second. Everything you see is in a state of flux. Things grow, they decay, they move, they change. Nothing is ever perfectly static. And this simple, constant change is the starting point for our next argument. Okay, let's walk through this one. It's pretty intuitive. Something that's cold can't just make itself hot, right? It needs a source of heat. So change needs a cause. Now, picture a long, long line of dominoes. The last domino falls because the one before it hit it, and that one fell because the one before it hit it. You can keep tracing that chain back. But here's the question. Can that chain of dominoes go on forever? The argument says no. Eventually, you have to get to a first domino that was pushed by something outside the chain of falling dominoes, a first move. And here's the formal version of that. Premise 1. Anything that changes is changed by something else. Premise 2. The world is obviously full of things that change. And the critical premise 3. You can't have an infinite chain of things causing other things to change. The line of reasoning, therefore, leads to a conclusion. There must be a primary, uncaused cause, an unmoved mover, that starts all the motion without being moved itself. Okay, section 3, the ultimate cause. We've looked at the universe's order and its constant change. But now, we're going to get even more fundamental and ask what might be the biggest question of all. Why is there something rather than just nothing? Now, to even try to tackle that, we need to get our heads around this key distinction between a contingent being and a necessary being. So almost everything you can think of, you, me, this planet, the sun, is a contingent being. All that means is that it could have not existed. Its existence depends on other things.
A necessary being, on the other hand, is something that must exist. Its existence isn't dependent on anything else. By its very nature, it simply can't not exist.
The logic here is actually very similar to the domino argument, but instead of talking about motion, we're talking about existence itself. So first step, anything that's contingent, anything that doesn't have to exist, needs a cause for why it exists. You exist because of your parents, who exist because of their parents, and so on. But again, you can't have that chain of contingent beings, each one depending on the last one, go back forever. The whole chain needs an ultimate cause that isn't contingent on anything else.
So laid out formally, you see the structure. Premise 1, contingent things need a cause. Premise 2, the universe is full of contingent things. Premise 3, an infinite chain of these contingent causes is impossible. Therefore, the conclusion is that there must exist a first, uncaused, necessary being. For a lot of theologians, this is considered one of the most powerful, purely logical arguments there is.
All right, section 4, the inner compass. For this last set of arguments, we're going to shift our gaze completely. We're moving from the external cosmos to the internal one. We're going to look at the world of human consciousness, morality, and our deepest intuitions. So this first argument from our inner world centers on the idea of fitra. You can think of it as a kind of innate disposition, or a natural inner compass. The claim is that all human beings have this built-in tendency to look for meaning beyond the material world and to turn towards some kind of higher power, especially when we're in a crisis. The argument is that this isn't just something we learn from our culture. It's a universal human experience. So how does this become a logical argument? Well, it works by analogy. Think about it like this. We all have an innate, deep feeling of thirst. And guess what? There's a real thing out there called water that actually corresponds to that feeling. We have innate hunger, and there's a real thing called food that satisfies it. So the argument goes, if we humans have this universal, innate, spiritual thirst, this longing for an absolute being, doesn't it make sense that it's pointing towards something real that would satisfy it? And for our final argument from the inner world, let's talk about morality. And this starts with a very fundamental question I want you to really consider. Is an act like torturing an innocent person for fun wrong, simply because our society has agreed it's wrong? Or is it objectively wrong, like wrong in and of itself, no matter what anyone thinks or any society agrees to? This entire argument really hinges on that question. Premise 1 makes the claim that if there's no God, then our moral values are really just human inventions, basically social agreements with no real authority. But premise 2 says that we experience certain moral values as if they're objectively real and absolutely binding, not just our personal preference. So if you accept both of those premises, the argument concludes that there must be a transcendent source for these absolute moral values, something that exists beyond just humanity. Okay, section 5, a cumulative case. So we've looked at several completely different arguments, each starting from a different place: cosmic order, change, existence itself, and our own inner world. The final step is to see how they all connect. And this is where it all pulls together. The point isn't that any single one of these arguments is supposed to be a standalone silver bullet. The idea is that they form a cumulative case. They're like different paths of reason, and according to this framework, they don't point to 5 different things. No, they point to different attributes of a single coherent being. A being that is the unmoved mover, the intelligent designer, the necessary being, the source of moral law, and the object of our own inner search. And that leaves us with our final question. This framework doesn't ask you to just blindly believe anything. It asks you to follow the logic. Now, whether you find these arguments compelling or not, the exercise itself is pretty fascinating. It proposes that when you take all these separate lines of reasoning from the world outside us and the world inside us, they all converge on a single point. And so the ultimate question is, what does it mean if they do?